All right, there we go. All right, so welcome everyone. Again, my name is Will Moss. I'm the founder and CEO of HBCU Connect. Today, we're going to be talking about leveraging targeted recruitment events and how you can make those events successful using some of the learnings that we've gained over the years. So again, this is a passion project for me that turned into what I do for my life's calling. HBCU Connect, we've been around since 2025. Originally, we were a social network that I just wanted to stay. I went to Hampton University in Virginia. I just wanted to stay in touch with my classmates. And I thought, why don't I create a website to do that? Because the internet was new when I graduated. I'm old. I'm a dinosaur. I remember the beginning of the internet. And I thought, let me create a website where I can stay in touch with my classmates. But I worked with so many folks that went to HBCUs. They said, don't just create this resource for Hampton University, create it for all of the HBCUs. So I did that, and it started to grow like wildfire. We became a top 5 destination on the internet for African Americans pretty quickly, and we started to get traffic from all different types of people, not only alumni, which I was targeting, but also students, also high school students that were looking at their college options. So we continued to grow the website so that we could basically serve this corner of the community and provide them with the opportunities no matter where they were in that life cycle. So if they're a high school student, we provided them with college opportunities. Once they went to college, we provided them with internships and scholarships. And then once they graduated, we wanted to provide them with career opportunities and networking opportunities. So that was sort of the start of HBCU Connect. Now I'm going to get into, we're talking about events. So the reason why I think this is important is because our history, we weren't an event company. I'm a software engineer by trade, and I started a website. It grew. We organically got into recruitment because some savvy recruiters tapped me on the shoulder while I was at work. I was, holding down my job at AT&T as a software engineer, and recruiters started calling me on my phone and saying, "Hey, can we recruit from your network? Because we see that you have tens of thousands, and at that time probably hundreds of thousands of alumni. And when we go on campus, we can get students, but we can't get graduates. So can we recruit on your website? Can we put our jobs on your forums?" And so after enough of these phone calls, I was like, how am I going to create a way for them to do this on the website so that they don't have to call me at work? So that's where the idea of creating an online career center came from, which we did in 2002. And we started collecting resumes from our members, and sort of the rest is history. So I looked at monster.com and Career Builder and decided, you know what, we'll create an online career center. It can be self-serve service, and they can come and post jobs, and they can access resumes. And this will be great for our community as well. And we had a little bit of a revenue stream. So 2 years later, I quit my job, got a little office space here in Columbus, Ohio, hired whoever was within arm's reach, my brother, my sister, some of my team members that are on the call today that I actually worked with at AT&T Bell Labs. And we started to run HBCU Connect full time in 2002. I'm sorry, 2004. And the rest is history. So now how that ties into recruitment events. And so now you know a little bit about who I am, but why are we qualified to speak on the topic of targeted recruitment events? Because as we were growing, and I'm getting ahead of my slides here, but as we were growing, this is some background on HBCU Connect. But as we were growing and working with different partners, we were doing online recruitment, right? So companies coming in online, signing up to recruit and post jobs on our site. We had some different clients, some bigger clients, and actually I'm going to give credit to, and I'll talk about a case study with one of our larger clients, which is Microsoft. Microsoft came in to work with us, and it was funny because before I left my job at AT&T to run HBCU Connect full time, I got a job interview at Microsoft. They made me an offer, and the only reason I didn't take the offer is because I wanted to run HBCU Connect full time. So full circle, they ended up being a client years later, and they were posting jobs on our website. They were recruiting talent, but the challenge for Microsoft was, and this may or may not be your challenge, but this is how we got into the recruitment space. And then we're going to talk about some things that may be relevant to your challenges as well, because some companies are larger, some organizations are smaller, but you still want to be able to leverage recruiting events. So we'll talk about that. But this is how we got into it, and this is how we gained our expertise. So Microsoft said, after year's partnership, we were sending them lots of applications online. Um, but the manager that I was working with, he said, look, this is great that you're sending us talent. We can see the talent coming in, but our challenge is we don't want the talent to get lost in the sea of applications that we are currently getting. We want to do something intentional to make sure that your candidates are getting a good look from our hiring managers. So they put the ball in our court. So I went and met with my team. I said, you know what, this is a challenge. They want to get our talent. They want to make sure our talent is not falling through the cracks. They want to make sure our talent is getting hired and getting a good look from the hiring managers. So they're, getting pipeline for interviews. What can we do to make sure that that happens? So we came up with, let's do exactly what they're asking for. Let's make sure that our talent gets in front of their hiring managers. So if they can bring their hiring managers to an event, right? We'll bring our talent to the event. So all we have to do is figure out where we want to have this event. And then my ask to them was bring some representation of who you're trying to hire. So we specialize in targeted events and diverse talent, right? So most of the companies that come to HBCU Connect are looking for diverse talent, primarily from HBCUs, which are primarily African American. However, what I'm going to share with you today can apply to non-diverse talent or any type of targeted talent you want to recruit. So whether that's targeted based on diversity or whether that's targeted based on skill sets, right? So this, what I'm going to cover will cover both of those things. But that's what Microsoft came to us with. So I asked them, who the people that you're trying to recruit, my ask to you is bring representation from your staff to the event that represents the people that you're trying to recruit, because that's going to help us have efficacy. So one of the challenges that they had as Microsoft was not only recruiting diversity, but another challenge, and this could apply to some of you all out there, and that challenge was in our location where we're hiring, or some of these different locations where we're hiring, we have a challenge with diversity in those locations. And then how do we get diverse individuals to relocate to that location? So that was part of the challenge that they presented to us. And we said, okay, let's find out where the talent is located. Let's host an event where the talent is, and then let's use the event to convince them and give them a reason to relocate, right? And so that's why it's important for you to bring representation, because they may ask, okay, if I'm an African American, for example, and you're asking me to relocate to Seattle, it may be something as basic as do they have a place where I can go get my hair cut, right? Or something do they have an African American community? Do they have a history? So we got so good at hosting these events and addressing some of the cultural needs of the people that we were trying to target, giving them a reason to want to relocate, that, I mean, at one of our events, we had the chief diversity officer at Microsoft fly out to an event that we hosted in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and she did the keynote for the event. And we'll talk about the agendas and typical agendas, but she did the keynote, and I remember her specific job, or her specific intention for being there, was to demonstrate that for all these people that they're asking to relocate from the East Coast and from Texas and all these different locations where we were hosting events, was to get them to relocate to Seattle and show them that Seattle has a rich and diverse culture and environment for them. So she pitched the whole thing, and by the end of the event, if you ask someone, would they consider, at the beginning of the event, let's say you ask someone, would they relocate to Seattle? they would probably say no because they didn't have a reason to relocate. So you might be in Poughkeepsie, Michigan, or someplace that they've never heard of, and we ask these candidates, or you have a job posting for these candidates, and you're asking them to relocate to a place that they've never heard of. The event can be the interface where they get a reason to relocate because they have a connection and they build a relationship with people at your organization or your company, and that gives them a reason. So at the end of the event, we wanted people to say, yes, I would consider relocating to Seattle or wherever those locations were that they were hiring. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of my slides, but again, I want this to be useful to you all. So I appreciate you all introducing yourselves in the chat. Feel free to use the raise hand reaction feature if you want to stop me as we go. But let me get into a little bit of what we're going to discuss. So what kind of events are we talking about? So I'm not talking about career fairs and conferences, right? We'll probably have another lunch and learn about how to maximize your presence at a career fair or a conference, whether that's virtual or in person. But in this event, we're talking about totally custom events meant to recruit talent or build pipeline and brand. They can be executed solo or strategically in alignment with other major events. So, for example, I'll tell a story about our first event that we hosted with Microsoft. They can be virtual, they can be in person, and we can talk about the pros and cons. And we can look at some best practices for conferences and career fairs in a future session. But in this session, we're going to look at some best practices for hosting custom events. All right. All right. So I think I already went ahead and talked about how we got into hosting events in the first place. It was one client that presented the challenge to us. And as we did more and more events specifically for Microsoft, we said, let's take our learnings and let's offer that to some of our other clients. So at this point, we've worked with probably hundreds of clients on different events. At one point in time, uh, actually during the pandemic, we were doing a whole lot of virtual events. So we did, up to 55 events in 1 year. So that's virtual and in person. But of course, during COVID, everyone shifted from doing in-person events to doing virtual events. So we got really active in doing virtual events. And that's something that we still do today. But let me tell you the story about our first event and one of the learnings from that. So there's different ways you can host in-person events, right? So when we first started, we were just doing in-person. We were not doing virtual. So there's when you start thinking about in-person, the first thing that comes to mind other than the date is where you're going to do the in-person event. So for us being new to doing events, we decided to do our first event in partnership based on the talent that Microsoft was looking for. They were looking for engineering talent. So we did our first event in partnership with a national conference and career fair for Black engineers called NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers. I'm sure many of you have heard of NSBE. So we did our first event as an evening after work event in collaboration with the NSBE event where we knew there would be talent. So before the event, we targeted the talent that was going to be at NSBE, and we targeted the talent that was in that local area. It happened to be in Indianapolis, Indiana, right? So we hosted the event. Microsoft was the sponsor for the event. They did what we asked. They brought their hiring managers, they brought their recruiters, and they brought representation from their staff that happened to be African American, who they were trying to recruit at this conference. So we hosted that first event at a restaurant that was connected to the main hotel for the event. It was like a 3-hour event, and we came up with the agenda based on what we thought the candidates would like to know about Microsoft, and then the pitch for relocation. And then we had, of course, a keynote that could give them the broad, high-level view of working at Microsoft as a company, all the different reasons, the hiring organization that was behind the event. And then we introduced the team so that the candidates knew who the right people were for them to be able to talk to based on what their team did and the type of people that they hired. And then we had networking at the event. And of course, we have food and drinks and things of that nature. And then my team staffed it for logistics as well as registration, and then hosting the event. So making sure the event flowed and everyone knew what was going on. That first event was a success. But the key takeaway was we partnered with another organization that we knew would have the talent that Microsoft was looking for. We found a location that was adjacent to that conference, and we hosted our first event. And our whole intention was, let's have success around the type of, or the quality and type of talent that's going to be at the event, and then let's, with that, we should be good. And we handle all of the logistics on the location. Now, there's other types of, if you're thinking about hosting an event in person, we've also done events on site. And I'll talk about two case studies that included an on-site component. So when I say on-site, that means at the location where you're hiring or at one of your locations that is central to where the talent is. So for example, Microsoft had a location in the Washington, D.C. area. That isn't where they were really hiring at the time for this particular group, but that's where the talent was that we were looking for. So one of the things that we got good at, and one of the things that you can do if you're hosting your own events and you don't have a partner like HBCU Connect, what you'll want to do, and we'll talk about what makes some of the successful components or some of the components of a successful event. But once you figure out who you're trying to reach or who you're trying to target for your event, you'll want to strategize around where is that talent located. So we figured out for Black engineers, it was the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, followed by Atlanta, followed by Texas, right? Those were like the key areas. And then of course the West Coast, there was some talent there as well. But the largest density of that talent was in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. So we decided, let's do an event in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. We'll do the same thing, fly out your recruiters, your hiring managers and representation, and we'll get the talent to the event. But Microsoft had a location, so we leveraged their Microsoft location in DC to host the event. So we've done this for other clients as well. So for example, Amex did an event in New York at their headquarters in New York. We've had on site, I'm going to do an example for Amazon. I'm going to do an example for Cerner, or a case study where they also did events on site at their location. And there's several advantages to that. Probably one of the biggest being cost savings when doing an in-person event. But then the other one is basically finding a location or a venue and then hosting the event at that venue where the talent is, right? So we'll talk about some of the details of that. All right, so why should we consider hosting a targeted recruitment event online or in person, and why we start doing events in the first place? So perfect for creating an interview slate. So the whole point of us starting to do events in the first place is that we wanted to make sure we were getting hires. So if you're looking to get hires, it's one thing to post a job on a website and hope that the right people see the job, hope that they go to your website and go through that online application process, hope that that they don't get screened out by AI, and this is what the candidate is thinking, right? But at an event, you can, if it's an in-person event, you can actually have FaceTime with the candidate, you can build a relationship, you can get a feel, you can screen them in. And this is what a big theme when we're talking about our events, and the format for the event and then success for the event. Because a lot of times when we talk about screening, we're talking about screening candidates out from an opportunity. But when we do events, we talk about screening candidates in, because it's one thing before the event to get a list of resumes, right? And you'll get, let's say 300 resumes for the event. And we're looking at who can we align for an interview based on their resume. But then there's going to be some resumes there that don't quite hit the mark, but they're coming to the event, and then you can use the event as that opportunity to screen in. So their resume might not have been as strong as their in-person communication skills or their in-person interview skills, their ability to explain what they do, and that might not be captured on a resume. So a big part of the reason why we wanted to host events was to screen candidates in, even though their resume might not get them that interview on first look, right? So perfect for creating a slate. Also, brand impressions that have impact. Think relocation. So if relocation is a challenge, you can leverage an event. And this is a big thing about, it's great for in-person events, right? But a lot of times, let's be honest, and I'll be transparent with you, a lot of times in-person events can be a little bit more expensive because you've got food and beverage, you've got the venue to worry about, you've got to staff the venue, you've got people maybe flying in or the travel expenses and things of that nature. So it can get more expensive. But with a virtual event, you don't have those same expenses. So the expenses can be a lot lower, but you can use a virtual event to attract talent nationwide, right? So especially if you're looking for hard to find talent, an in-person event might not make sense because you might not have the density of that hard to find talent in one location where they can just drive to the event, right? So to keep costs low, you can have an online or virtual event, invite that targeted talent from wherever they are located to a virtual event, and then leverage that virtual event to not only pitch your opportunity, to pitch the company culture, to have them meet some of your team and get a feel for your team, but also to talk about where you have the opportunities and to give them a reason to want to relocate. Another opportunity for why you might want to host an event is to demonstrate diversity within the company and company culture so that the candidates, if the candidate feels that they're a fit for your company, that's going to give them another reason to go through the application process and to go through the interview process. And the same for you, right? If you find that a candidate demonstrates that they're a fit based on a conversation you had at an event, that's going to give you more incentive to follow up with that candidate and align them for an interview. And then, of course, candidates don't get lost in the applicant tracking system, which was the original problem that led to us hosting events. Now, you also want to turn interest into intent. So how do you engage passive job seekers and turn casual interest into real excitement about joining your company and again, address relocation? So many attendees are passive job seekers. They're curious, but they're not applying. So this is a big one, actually. So a lot of the talent, especially, this is why I say we're talking about targeted events, talking about targeted talent. So if you have talent that you're looking for that has a certain type of education, that has a certain type of experience, they're harder to find, at a random event or a random career fair or random conference. You want to target those people. Those people are typically gainfully employed, right? So what you can do with an event, the event doesn't have to be a high pressure sell your company and get them to want to join you right away. The event can be a relaxed environment where that highly sought after talent can come learn more about your company and develop a desire to want to work with you based on what you presented at the event. And a job posting just sometimes it just can't do that, right? But at an event, if you're looking for highly sought after talent, they probably have a job. So you have the opportunity to give them a reason to want to further the conversation and then potentially apply for your opportunities. And this happens at a lot of our events where we go after a lot of passive job seekers that are not applying for jobs actively online. I would say the vast majority of the attendees at our events, they're not online actively looking for jobs because they have a job and they have some skill set that we're looking for. So we have to get them to the event and then leverage the event and the content in the event to get them to have interest and turn that interest to an intent to apply or an intent to have a further conversation that leads to them applying, interviewing, and being hired. So this is also your opportunity to showcase company culture, leadership, and the appeal to relocation, and then have candidates leave thinking, I can really see myself there. at the company. And a lot of times we'll have questions. We like to do like a Q&A if it's a virtual event. If it's an in-person event, they're having these one-on-one conversations with recruiters or team members or individual contributors, what have you. And a lot of times those questions that they're asking are around the company culture, and a lot of that doesn't translate with the job posting, but can translate in a conversation. All right. So I wanted to make sure that you all leave this session. And by the way, I'm going to try to go to 12:45, but I'll hang on as long as you guys want me to answer questions, right? So at 12:45, I'll try to stop my presentation, and then I'll open it up for questions, and you guys can ask me any questions. We have a lot of experience doing events and all different. If you can think of a format for an event, we've probably done it. So I'm happy to answer those questions. But I want to give you some takeaways, and I'll share the deck. Just let me know if you want it. I'll share the deck, and I'll also share the recording. But I wanted to come up with some good takeaways for you if you're thinking about doing events in 2026. All right, so what are the key ingredients that make a recruitment event successful from the candidate perspective, right? So when we start an event, we're thinking about, all right, what do you want the candidate to come away with after they attend this event, right? So why should I leave my current employer, current location, or current career to work with you? Why should I choose your company over another? What is your company culture? What are the people like that I will be working with? This is a big one with events, and you have the opportunity to share that. What is your position on diversity and me bringing my true self to work? That's a big one with targeted, talent. Are you really hiring, or what are we doing here? So, and that's a very big opportunity and a very big point, because if you want to host an event and you want that event to be successful, you want to know what the outcome, you want to have an outcome for the event. So sometimes the outcome is we want people to get interviews and we want people to get hired. Sometimes the outcome is we want the community to know what we're doing, what opportunities we have, and to give a brand impression, right? So whatever that goal is, you want to make sure that's clear not only to your team, to who your partners are. So if we're your partner, we want to know what that is. And then, of course, to the candidates, we want them to understand that if you're hiring, that they know you're hiring and what those opportunities are. Or if you're giving a brand impression on this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is what we have coming down the pipe, then we want to make that clear to the candidates. All right. Now, from an employer perspective, you want to define those desired outcomes, super important. Who you want to target, who you want to partner with to have a successful event, because one of the biggest partner points will be around talent, right? So you want to find partners that can help you get the right talent to your event. To decide on virtual versus in-person, and I have a slide that can break down some of the pros and cons on that. You want to define an agenda that has impact. You want to set up landing pages and materials to get the word out, and then to register and work with the candidates. You also want to have a marketing program. And then here's some of the secret sauce that we've implemented over the years for having a successful event. So what are those key ingredients? So one of our secret ingredients, this is what we do, is sometimes you'll want to host an event, and some of you may have done this in the past. You'll set up the event, you've got the location, or you've got the online presence, and then you'll say, okay, now we got to get the word out about the event so that people sign up and come to the event. In some cases, you don't even have the people sign up. You just tell them where the event is, whether it's on Zoom or in person, on campus, what have you. You say, hey, we're having this event, and it's going to be here, and we'll see you there, right? So when we do events, that's not what we do. When we do events, all of our events, people have to register, and in some cases, we are screening people to make sure that the event is a fit for them, and the event is a fit from the employer perspective, so that they're not wasting their time, right? So we have 100% of our events, people have to register. Now, not 100%, are we screening people out, but we at least want to know who's coming. The other reason why we want to register people for our event is so that we want it to be a successful event. So part of having a successful event is knowing what your attendance is going to be, because you don't want to spend a lot of money and effort and have two people show up at the event. So how do you know how many people are going to show up at your event? You register the people. That'll give you one indication. And then we go a step further is after they've registered, they get into our communication stream. So you see some scheduled communications that we have at all of our events. So once they register, then we're going to, one of the communications they're going to get leading up to the event is a confirmation email or a confirmation phone call. So at all of our events, we have the registration number and then we have the confirmation number. And guess what? The actual number of people that attend will be a percentage of the confirmation number, not the registration number. I mean, it'll be a percentage at the end of the day, but it'll be a smaller percentage. So you want to take that confirmation number and use that as an indication to your attendance. And usually, it can be 40% of the people show up, 50% or 60% of the people will show up from that confirmation number. So you use those numbers and experience over time to know how you're doing based on registrations and confirmations. Now, once someone registers for the event, it's very, very important that you have a communication stream leading up to the event if you want to have a successful event. So like I said, I know some of you may have done events, you posted it on LinkedIn, you posted it on your Facebook page or wherever your social media touch points are. Maybe you emailed it out to your applicant tracking system candidates that are in the pipeline. But if you don't register the people and know who's interested, then you don't know who to follow up with after you send or do that initial marketing, right? So once they're registered, we'll do an initial outreach to get them registered. Once they've registered, we'll confirm that we have their registrations, so they're in process. Or if it's not an event where we're screening for specific talent, they can just come to the event and we'll share the confirmation email with them with the details of the event. If it's a screened event, then we need to communicate, yes, you've been approved to attend the event based on your background, or no, this event might not be a fit for you, but keep an eye on your email for future events, right? So you'll confirm the folks. Now, for those that are confirmed, you want to give them the specific details and you want to ask them if they plan to attend the event so you can keep track of confirms. Now all of these things that I'm mentioning, over the years, we've created a system to track these things. So we have a system, and I'll show it to you if we have time. You want to come up with an agenda and communicate the agenda. You want to have a final reminder. Like, for example, for this event, I sent out a final reminder. So I had that queued up, ready to go. And I usually hit the button 5 minutes before the event to invite folks into the event. Then we'll have a post-event follow-up. So talking about next steps, if you want them to apply or whatever action you want them to take. And then a post-event checkup, usually a predetermined time to find out, and this is usually from our perspective, to find out if they got an interview, if they got hired, and we'll follow up with both parties, with the employer and the candidate. All right, so virtual versus in person. So here's some of the differences when you're deciding whether you want to do a virtual versus an in-person event. One of the advantages of in-person is you can do strong relationship building, better employer branding, higher candidate commitment, and the big thing, or the big difference, in my opinion, is you can have on-the-spot interviews, and whether those are formal interviews or informal. So what I mean by that is we have had events where we have formal interview spaces set up with recruiters that are hosting interviews at the event. And in another scenario, however, which is probably more common at sort of our networking events, is their conversations, their one-on-one conversations between your recruiter, your hiring manager, or your team members that they have with a great candidate, and they screen those candidates in. They say, hey, we want to have a follow-up conversation. And in some cases, like when we were really going hot and heavy with Microsoft, they would have two people at a desk with computers, and based on the conversations that their recruiters had with the candidates, if they had a good conversation, they would bring the candidate over to the desk and get that candidate aligned for an interview the next day from the event. And they have people ready to do that on the spot. But of course, in-person events are more expensive. You're limited to your local market from a talent perspective. Usually need a longer lead time because you got logistics. and then you're subject to the weather, travel, traffic, and even health when it came to COVID, because we were doing events in person, and then we shifted to doing virtual once COVID happened and got really good at doing virtual events. And some of the benefits there are national reach, lower cost, faster to deploy, so you can pull the event together much faster, a little bit easier to collect data on attendance and all of the details of the campaign pre and post. More flexibility for the candidates because they can tune in from home, they can tune in from wherever they are. However, there's that less personal interaction. It's harder to do like an on-the-spot interview, and then sometimes you can have an engagement drop off. Okay, so now, so you decided to host the event. Now what? So we have a process for that. I'll share the slide. I'm gonna try to hurry up because I only got 4 minutes to go through some of my case studies, but I want to share some of the case studies. But a very important thing is when you host an event, and this is one, if you want to take away anything from this, is if you're going to host an event and invest the time, energy, money, whatever into an event, have a plan for digesting the talent. Because a lot of times we'll host events, we'll have hundreds of people sign up for the events. We'll have those that attended the event, we'll have those that couldn't attend, but they wanted to apply or they wanted to learn more about the company. So have a plan for working with that talent, um, before the event. So that's a pre-event plan. So whether that's reaching out to the candidates before the event, scheduling some of them for interviews, a during event plan. So what are we going to do at the event to maximize the talent? And then a post-event plan for, okay, after the event is over, how are we going to engage the talent to get hires from the event or to keep them engaged with our brand, right? And so we'll talk about some of the details of that. Now, I have three case studies. I don't know if I'm going to have time for all of them. One of them was with Cerner, one was with Amazon, and one was with Microsoft. I'm going to give you the high level and the details and the differences. And if I have a little bit of time or we don't have too many questions, I'll show the video. Now, the high level on the Cerner event that made this unique, and I tried to create or select three different case studies that were different. The Cerner event had it, these were in-person events, right? Cerner, what they did is they said they knew what their goal was clear before the event. They knew they wanted to hire technical talent, engineering talent, program management talent. And they came to us and said, where can we find the talent and how can we make sure that we are able to hire and recruit the talent? And they had to relocate to Kansas, right? Once we find the talent. So we came up with the strategy of a two-part event. So one event was in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, which had the highest density of the talent they were looking for. They brought their recruiters, they brought their hiring managers, and they brought representation. We hosted an event we found a venue. We hosted an event, was a successful event. They screened, so they were ready when we talk about screening in, their recruiters had their iPads right there. They had conversations. The candidates that they liked, they took their notes and they screened them in for interviews. Now, instead of those interviews happening on the spot or the next day, they had a second event where they took the best candidates from the first event based on the resumes and conversations, and they had a second event, which was an interview event, where they flew the candidates into Kansas City to their location, with the intention being every candidate got an interview and every candidate got the experience to determine, that they wanted to relocate and work in Kansas City. So we hosted a second event. Every candidate that flew out got an interview. I think there were roughly, there were 16 on-site interviews. That first event, we had 74 candidates there. The pipeline was 287. And then after that second event, where the candidates came on site, of those 16, 9 of those candidates accepted offers and went to work and relocated from the East Coast to Kansas City as a part of this two-event engagement. And so I have some pictures, and like I said, I'll share the slides with you. You can check out like pictures from those two events. Now, here's another case study. This case study is with Amazon. We did a lot of events with Amazon, and we continue to do events with Amazon. Amazon is huge, so they have different talent needs in different areas. So we've worked with different parts of the business where some parts of the business we're looking for engineers, other parts of the business we're looking for students and operations managers to go into their fulfillment centers. So I have video from that, but I don't think we have time to get to it because I want to leave some time for Q&A. But the results of the event that we did for this was for early and career talent. That Cerner event was for experienced talent, so no students. This Amazon event included students and recent grads. They were looking to hire them into their fulfillment centers. So we did all of the work up front to source the candidates, to get the right candidates into the pipeline. They selected from our sourcing and then their secondary sourcing where they called the candidates, did like a pre-screen. Then they selected who they wanted to fly in for interviews and site visits. So it was like we didn't have a first event. We just did the sourcing work and the upfront work to market and attract people into the pipeline. And then we had an event on site and at several different locations. But on site, they all got interviews. Everyone that flew in got an interview. They all got a tour of the fulfillment center where they would be working. And at the end of the day, we sat there with the Amazon team and they made a decision on incline or decline. So an incline was basically an offer to the candidate. Decline, of course, was a non-offer. So we had 73 candidates that flew in for this program. 38 were incline, 8 were interns, and 30 were full-time. So there was a 75% accept rate, which increased from 45% due to the new format that we used on site. Because one of the challenges for Amazon is, so if you have this challenge where you're trying to bring employees in and you have low retention or you have a low accept rate on your offers, you want to bring the candidates in so that they see what the environment is before they actually come to work there, if it's the kind of environment where you have a lot of attrition. And that was a challenge for Amazon. So our thought was, let's bring them on site, let them see what it's really like, let them interview with different managers, and then they can make their decision based on that experience, and you can as well. So that's the second case study. I got video from that as well, and some of our other engagements with Amazon that I can share. But I think the biggest consumer of, or partner for us with the event work, and this is not to say that we haven't worked with companies of all different sizes. These are just some case studies where we're doing some really good tracking. But we've, in-person events or virtual events, you can be a company of any different size. All right, so we hosted 7 different events for various business units within Microsoft over a 1-year period. This is just one of the years working with them. They were looking for software engineers, technical program managers, operations managers. As a result of that, we had an average attendance between 50 and 100 professionals. Over 1,100 resumes were collected. They did technical screens, phone screens with the candidates with 140. They had over 100 interviews, and they extended offers to 40 engineers, which is a big deal, especially for what they typically pay to like a headhunting service versus what they paid to help us market the event and source for the event. It was a huge win for Microsoft to get that many diverse engineers. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover. Of course, with the heavy lifting with an event, HBCU Connect is here to help. But I wanted this lunch and learn to be me sharing and being transparent on things that we've done to have successful events. Wanted to make myself available to discuss if you're thinking about hosting an event, how to have that event successful, whether or not we help you with it or not, but we can help. Happy to have a discussion about it. Again, we'll follow up with these details post-event. But if you'd like to ask any questions, you're thinking about hosting an event, I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer to chat about whether it's a virtual event, a live event, maybe something I didn't cover. We have a lot of experience, so I probably have a scenario that might be similar to what you might be thinking. So feel free to use the raise hand feature within Zoom. And if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer. And if you don't know how to use the raise hands feature, it's a reaction feature. So there's a thing in Zoom called React. and then there's something called raise hand, or you can just come off of mute and ask a question. And if there, we didn't see any questions in the chat, did we? If not, no questions? Is anybody thinking about hosting events in 2026?
Kiana, there is Kiana White that has the
Oh,
rice.
okay. Okay, Kiana, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, yeah. I was raising my hand. So,
Oh, sorry about
hi,
that.
thank you so much for this session. So thank you so much for providing some of those case studies. That's been really helpful. I work in the insurance industry and I work for a global organization. And so for me, it's while we can hire diverse talent in technology, accounting, and all that behind the scenes, but students and people want to see that in sales and in those spaces that historically haven't been taken up for the insurance industry. So can you speak on just a diverse talent that's in your pipeline? Because we would probably want to move forward with like a virtual event or anything that started off, but I want to push for sales talent, for example, or insurance professionals that could be
Awesome.
ready to go in one of my 700 offices.
This is why I love questions, right? Because we have not only done events in the insurance space for some partners, and I can talk about those events with you, in a follow-up call, but we've also done events for sales talent. Most recently, I'll give one case study for Yelp. We hosted Yelp hires a lot of sales talent with HBCU Connect. I don't know if we'll put this in quotes, but HBCU Connect, I think, has been one of the most, if not the most, successful partner for them to do virtual events to get hires of sales talent. So to speak to your question about the type of talent that we have and our approach to an event. So if we're going to help you, so I didn't want this to be like a sales pitch for HBCU Connect to do event, but of course we do that, and this is how we stay in business, right? So I didn't want this to be a sales pitch for everything that we can do and for you, that kind of thing. But however, there's some heavy lifting involved in events. So if you want to have a successful event, you want to have a partner that has a talent, to your point and to your question. The thing about us is we're like LinkedIn. The only difference between us and like a LinkedIn is that we focus on African American talent and Latinx talent or Latina talent, right? So we have a high density of educated Black and Latino professionals in our network. Now, but other than those two factors or demographics, we have talent across the board from engineering to folks that majored in English to folks that are doing sales. We have all different types of talent. But the insurance, so in one of my slides, and like I said, I'm happy to share my slides with anyone, but one of my slides, I mentioned the word insurance. And when we do an event, our insurance, so we'll go out and market your event to our own database. So let's say we have thousands of people that have a background in insurance in our database, have a background in sales in our database. But my insurance that you have a successful event is that my team will go out and source whoever you're looking for as my insurance that you have a successful event. So even though we may already have thousands of people in our database that would be a fit and they're going to sign up for your event, we're going to go out and get new people that are actively looking for those opportunities and invite them to the event or invite them to be a part of our network and attend your event. So that's my insurance that you'll have a successful event no matter what, because we've had engagements where, for example, when we first started working with Microsoft, we didn't have like a million Black engineers in our database. But by the end of our years and years of engagement, we skew like it's a top three major for us is computer science and engineering because of all of the work we've done to find engineers and technical folks in the community. So we skew that way. But we went out and found those people and invited them into our network forever after to receive these opportunities. So I would have nothing but confidence to to help you host that event. We'll love to talk afterwards if you're interested. Any other questions? If you're thinking about hosting an event, I'll share these slides with you, but I think my intention is that we make ourselves available and our expertise available so that if you have any questions around having a successful event, believe me, we've probably dealt with it because we've done, like I said, we do these custom events, but we also do conferences and career fairs. And I'll probably do another lunch and learn for being prepared to maximize on a conference or a career fair. But if there are no other questions, I will follow up with an email that shares the slides and the recording as well. And I would invite you all to have a conversation with myself or whoever might be your point of contact here at HBCU Connect. But I hope this was helpful. I try to be transparent as possible on our secret sauce and how we have successful events. And we look forward to hosting other lunch and learns like this in the future. So thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. Take care. Thank you.